I am Dr. Raminsky. I am the professor of communication studies that we have here on campus at Frostburg State University in our Department of Communication. I also coordinate our leadership studies minor and our communication leadership lab. And I'm excited to be joined by partners from a variety of groups, both on campus and off campus. Right now I'm getting support and convening from the Allegany County Library System, who set up this Zoom so that you can access it. You could register, and we have secure, kind of the meeting space online. We have also some members of our Choose Civility Steering Committee. Renee Mason is the coordinator of our chapter here in Allegany County, so she'll be helping as a member of the Allegany County Library System as well. And of course, we have those members who are here from the campus. Some of the people are going to comment a little bit and kind of scoot out onto the next thing on our busy campus. We have a lot going on, a lot of opportunities, and we hope to do these kinds of events where we can record them so you can look at them later too. So this is being recorded, just so you know. And this is the convening of kind of an intersection of things. It is the Day of Civility in Allegany County, which is an annual event that helps us to reflect on how we can reflect on principles of civility we can share or we can negotiate, how we can keep civil conversations going, how we can really look to bridge divides. And there are a variety of events that have been going on. There's actually one right after our event that you can check out through Allegany College of Maryland, and some other opportunities that include social media campaigns online too. So you'll learn more about that before the end of the event. We also have this as one of many options during Bobcats Against Bias Week at Frostburg State University. And I'm going to exhibit number 1. Dr. John Lombardi is wearing one of the t-shirts with the hashtag. So if you get a chance and you feel inclined to talk about an observation, do a screenshot, whatever motivates you to share some learning you're experiencing tonight, and post that on whatever social media you would like to, you've got a hashtag, that you can do that with now. And Bobcats Against Bias is really an effort that started within the Department of Communication to try to help us have a way to, indicate publicly and when we have conversations online that we have these values, that we want to have more inclusive campus environment and region. So, that intersection of campus and community partners is really important. And I would say also that, we couldn't do this without partners that extended beyond the department. The Office of Civic Engagement, Patrick O'Brien, who directs that, is here with us too. And community members, like those here in the room, students that show up, for events, and of course online, some of you are there too, that, help us keep conversations like this going. So you'll still maybe see some others coming into the event, so that's great. I'm looking forward to having more joy and be able to listen to our leader in residence. That's the other part of this intersection. This is our annual leadership residency program. And this is an opportunity for those who are interested in the study and practice of leadership to learn from someone or a group that we invite to campus every year. Since I coordinate the leadership studies minor, which is coordinated through my role within the Department of Communication, I get to interact with a lot of different people to kind of pull that into my classroom teaching, but then also to do events like this where we can kind of intersect people from beyond campus and learn together. So we are really happy, to be able to have Dr. Dorene Ciletti with us as our leader in residence. She was able to meet with students in my Introduction to Leadership Studies class. She also was involved in the citizen leadership class earlier this week. And so that experience of, talking with students and meeting in the classroom, but also being involved in events that reach out more to help us all learn together about leadership is something significant. And, the intersection of leadership with social media civility, I think, is something that we'll be thinking about tonight, because it might or might not seem evident initially, but really communication leadership is, I think, what everyone is feeling a little bit of tension and stress and, kind of a need to kind of figure out some new norms around, right? We have this way of needing to adapt, right? There's a lot of change going on. And, whether it's the great resignation and how people are really just changing what they are, thinking about their work-life balance and how they're going to, make choices about jobs that they have or careers that they have because of that. Whether it's about divisiveness and propaganda even that is online, that is being pushed out by digital ministries and governments. There's a real need to think about how social media civility is something we need to take seriously, and we need to think about in the context of, the study and practice of getting better at communication leadership. So these are all things that we are studying in our new curriculum at the Department of Communication. And I'm hoping that, you'll come to other events or you'll check out our programs and see if there's something that might work for you to learn. We also have a upcoming strategic communication certificate program that's going to be fully online, but it'll be for returning adult learners. So let me just mention a couple more things, and I'm going to ask for Dr. Lombardi, who is another colleague of mine in the Department of Communication, to help me welcome everyone. I just wanted to thank Renee and Allie Klein, also from the Allegany County Library System, who's helping to do the moderation in Zoom. So I'm going to ask Dr. Lombardi, who is our faculty chair for the Faculty Senate here on campus, to say a few words. And in part, I'm asking him because he's a colleague, and we kind of had some ongoing conversations over time about what is the intersection between the ways we study and practice and learn communication, right? I'm in the communication studies program that will become strategic communication as a major, and mass communication is the area that Dr. Lombardi is taught in, and that's going to become digital media, emerging media, right? So it's kind of a sign of the times. And so, I can remember back to when we were having conversations about mass personal communication, and how we have for a while needed to start to think about the intersection of the face-to-face, on-the-ground communication and the online ways that we are interacting, and how that kind of blurs boundaries and expectations. So again, those will be some of the things that will come out, I think, tonight. So, what's great about this conversation that, we want to make sure we welcome you into is it will be a discussion. It'll start with a discussion that is kind of, started by Dr. Saletti doing a keynote address, just a brief conversation about or delivery of her ideas about what she thinks important with social media literacy and social media civility. And then it's going to include our 4 local speakers, our 4 local leaders that are using social media in different ways to connect online to the community. So, we'll get into introductions of who those folks all are in a moment, but let me turn it over to Dr. Lombardi just to say a few words.
Well, thank you, Alicia, and thank you all for being part of this, whether you're at home, whether you're in the room, whether you engage with this content after it's posted at some point, whether you engage in a hashtag, whatever it may be. I don't think I need to tell all of you or any of you how important this is. Social media in virtually all its forms has become a very powerful tool, not just to keep up with friends and colleagues and to see what the latest special is at their local restaurant, but it really drives issues. It drives political issues, it drives any number of other issues, and it's becoming incredibly immersive, it's becoming incredibly complex, and it can and oftentimes does become incredibly divisive. Not only in what we post, but what we act and react to. The algorithms behind virtually any of the social media platforms or Google or other places are designed in such a way that not only does it track what we think, but it builds a profile of who we are and uses that information then to target specific messages to us that feeds that part of us, whatever it is that it is decided is important to them. What happens oftentimes then is over time, whatever opinion we have, fact or fiction, becomes reinforced because we get more of that same information rather than competing information. That becomes particularly important when it comes to things like whether or not to vaccinate, whether or not to vote for this candidate or that candidate, whether to invest or not invest, whether to go to this school or that school, or eat here or eat there. And so it's becoming incredibly important. And so in my role as faculty senate chair, I have a number of different things that I try to keep my eye on and try to work around. One of those, and which has really come primarily from student concerns and issues, is hate and bias. And what do we do with that? How do we balance free speech with hateful or biased language? And it just so happens that this past weekend, I went through a 3-day workshop dealing with how to do these types of things, how to engage people with reasonable and reasoned discourse, even when we disagree. It's perfectly fine to disagree, but the key is, of course, to actually listen. Too often, particularly in social media, we're speaking, and I'll use air quotes for that. We're speaking just to be heard. We're not speaking to learn. We're not speaking to engage. We're just trying to talk louder than the other person. And social media allows that to happen because of real and at least perceived anonymity. And so it becomes a very powerful tool, and oftentimes used in what I would say are maybe not the best of ways. And so as I tried to learn more about how to navigate hate and bias and how to balance those two things, I think these types of discussions are incredibly important. So I appreciate all of you taking the time to engage with this. With all that said, and I hate to sound hypocritical, but I'm afraid I cannot stay for the whole thing. So despite the fact that I have to depart, does not mean that I don't think it's important by any stretch, but I'm glad the rest engage with it and hopefully continue to.
Yeah, no, thank you for making time. I know everyone's busy and that you've had a long day, long week. He also edited a podcast that you'll be able to watch or listen to later that's about political civil discourse. That's part of our offerings for the Day of Civility. So we appreciate that. And you'll be able to watch it later.
So thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lombardi. All right, so we're going to get started. All the fanfare is over now. So I do want to introduce Dr. Saletti, who is our leader in residence, just in a formal way to begin, and then we'll let her speak a bit, and we'll then move on to discussion where we learn a little bit more who's in the room, you know, in terms of the work connect, you know, online and on the ground. So Dorene Ciletti, who has an MBA and a PhD, is an associate professor and director of the marketing and sales program and co-founder of the Michael Pitterich Sales and Innovation Center, as well as the co-director of the Women in Industry for Rowland School of Business at Point Park University in Pittsburgh. She has a PhD in rhetoric, and actually it's a program that she and I met during, and it has a focus on integrated marketing communication from Duquesne University. Dr. Saletti's expertise in marketing, sales, and strategy has been instrumental in developing new curriculum, facilitating corporate and community-facing initiatives, and leading student teams to success in regional and national competitions. Her teaching centers on experiential learning and design thinking, including consulting and collaborating with businesses and community organizations. She has organized and moderated several major conferences and has served as an ad hoc journal reviewer and author for a variety of scholarly publications. And in addition to higher education, she worked in marketing and sales in the healthcare and financial service sectors, and serves on the boards of not-for-profit organizations focused on inclusion and community development. And so it's my pleasure to turn this over to Dorene, my friend, and Dr. Ciletti, my colleague.
Thank you so much. I'll just take a moment to pull up some materials. And this can help guide the comments that I'll make today as we move toward our panel discussion, which I'm really excited about. So thank you so much, Dr. Raminsky. And I'm honored to be here as part of Frostburg State's Leadership Residency Program. As Dr. Raminsky noted, I am an associate professor and program director in the Rowland School of Business at Point Park University in Pittsburgh. And I thought I would also introduce myself through social media. So if you see me on LinkedIn, you'll see that my LinkedIn profile kind of mirrors my professional background. If you find me on Facebook, you'll probably be greeted with a photo of me with my family. If you see me on Twitter, you'll see an image of Pittsburgh in the background. On LinkedIn, well, you don't really see too much there, but you'll typically see more information about some of the interests and hobbies that I have. And I am on Nextdoor. I use it minimally, but it is a social media platform, so you can find me there as well. Social media is kind of interesting because it really creates a virtual identity for us. And we do have some control over that identity. I don't say full control because the platforms do provide some guidelines for the kind of information that we include. But one of the things to think about as we start a discussion about social media is that it does create that virtual brand for us, and it does impact how others perceive you. And LinkedIn, I see that as more of a professional networking tool. So I keep that more closely aligned to what I'm doing professionally. On Facebook, that's a way to keep in touch with friends and family. And so that's a much more personal social media platform for me. Although I do post some professional things on there as well, depending on how I think it connects personally. Twitter, honestly, I'm not on Twitter all that much, but I see that as kind of, you know, a more general social media platform for me. And LinkedIn, I have some fun with photos, nature photos and personal interest photos, and once in a while sharing some work-related or professionally connected information. So maybe one thing you can all think about is how you're using social media as we move into a little more information about this. Now, social media is pervasive. And if you take a look at some of the stats, the use of social media has grown significantly over the last about 21 years that this, or rather, 15, 16 years that this study's been conducted. In 2005, about 5% of US adults were using social media. That number is now up to about 72%. And we're using social media, and these are numbers based on US studies. We're using social media to not only connect with one another, but also to engage with news content. We are using it to share information, and we're using it for entertainment. So again, you can think about some of the ways that you're using social media. And you might also think about some of the platforms that you're using. One platform that I didn't include on my intro, because again, it's not one that, it's one that I use more for consuming information than creating information, is YouTube. But YouTube and Facebook are the most widely used platforms. And there are many social media platforms, many that I'm not on personally, maybe you are, some of the other platforms. You can take a look at this graphic that looks at a variety of social media platforms, as well as the percentage of adults that have used the platforms. Now, there are variations among use in terms of things like characteristics of age, gender, educational attainment. So we do find those differences. And from the perspective of reaching audiences, that information can be particularly important as we're assessing the social media channels that might make sense for us to be using. When we think in general about use of social media, there are a number of potential impacts to that use and to the sharing of messages. There's some things to think about, and particularly when we're talking about dialoguing. Right? There can be opportunities for social and political participation that may not have been accessible to some that are now more open and available. It could be an equalizing force for those who are disenfranchised. Social media can provide a public forum for private voices. You or I don't have to be a broadcaster. We don't have to be an athlete. We don't have to be a politician to have this public forum available to us. Use of social media can generate a multiplier effect. So it can allow messages to reach a larger audience through likes, through shares, through meme creation. We have that ability to reach a much wider group. Social media can also lead to influencing of behaviors. Perhaps you have seen a recipe on a social media platform that you have then decided to create. Perhaps you have learned about an event on social media, maybe even this event, and you made a decision to attend it. Perhaps you have learned about a cause and you have decided to get engaged or to make some efforts towards behavior change due to that cause. So in that way, can also serve as an agent of change. Now, if you think about these particular impacts, they can be positive or they can be negative. It depends on, right, a lot of factors, including who is using social media, what the intent is, what the algorithms are, and how that impacts the sharing. So social media isn't inherently positive or negative, but it does have the ability to be both. So what role does social media play relative to incivility? You've probably heard terms like keyboard warrior, right? And you may have yourself been involved in an uncivil discussion on social media. At the very least, you've probably seen an uncivil discussion play out or seen other acts of incivility occurring through social media. We know that social media is widely used, has broad access. But when we think about incivility in general, recent study, the most recent version of the study, and this has gone on for just about 10 years, done by a research organization, found that Americans do think there's a civility problem. So that hasn't changed much. Now, it's still a pretty significant percentage. The civility is seen as an issue. And you probably won't be surprised to see that many see social media as one of the culprits. The perception is that social media has had more negative than positive impacts on civility. And while the percentages vary a bit by gender and generation, overall, it's a fairly significant number. Social media, in fact, is seen as the top source of incivility. And those who were surveyed blamed the internet and social media for the demise of civility, and that has increased from 24% in 2012 to 57%, more than half of Americans believe that social media is a top source of incivility as of 2019. This incivility can take many different forms. One study categorized themes of uncivil behavior into a number of categories: insulting language, name calling, obscene language, mockery, emotional language, exaggerated misrepresentations, including negative instigation and threats. Again, you can probably think of examples, unfortunately, that you've seen on social media that follow some of these particular themes. This incivility is also increasing. The estimate in 2013 was that there were approximately 5.5 uncivil interactions online per week, and that an individual was involved in. Well, rather 4.4 in 2013, 5.5 in 2021. So the incidence of incivility online is actually increasing. So how does this impact public discourse? There are a number of types of incivility that are occurring. We know that it is increasing in frequency. We know that many people believe that social media is a cause of incivility. So what does this mean for discourse? How does this impact the way we're interacting with each other? Well, I took a moment earlier today to grab a screenshot from Facebook related to that demonstrated incivility in some way. And unfortunately, there are many of these examples. It was not difficult to find this, but you can take a moment to take a look. And I grabbed part of a thread. So this is from a news station's reporting of our new Supreme Court justice being confirmed. This was an example of a response thread to that. So the question often is, would this kind of discussion occur if people were meeting face to face? Or is this more pervasive because technology mediates the communication? You know, it's definitely something for us to think about and to continue to engage with each other to discuss this level of incivility. And this is not what I might consider an extreme example, although it's certainly an example of incivility that I personally would prefer not to see, and maybe you wouldn't either. But this is the kind of thing that we're often exposed to on a regular basis when we visit social media sites. Something that one of the professors mentioned earlier in the introduction was this idea of algorithms. They're designed to create order and relevancy in social media, but often what happens is it filters what we're exposed to, and it sometimes limits that exposure so that we start to see materials, messages, information, ads that are more aligned with what the algorithm believes that we either our own belief system or the things that we're most interested in engaging in. So that can create its own set of challenges. When the information gets pre-filtered for you, it again can help to create some relevance, but at the same time, it can actually limit your ability to see what's really out there, including differences of opinion. But research has found that users of social media are willing to take some action to try to counter this rampant incivility. There was a fairly large percentage, almost half, that are willing to make an effort to be civil when they themselves are treated uncivilly. They're willing to encourage friends, family, and coworkers to be more civil. And you can see that there are some other actions that that they will consider doing. But it's interesting because it's almost half are willing to make an effort to be civil even when treated uncivilly. So we want to start seeing that put into practice because thus far, the percentage of uncivil, the number of uncivil actions per week that people are reporting experiencing isn't declining, it's actually increasing. So how can we rise above the incivility we encounter on social media and engage in less divisive discourse in our lives? That's the question that we need to think through and we need to look at how we can take some responsibility for the messaging and the information that we're putting out there, and how we can model civility, both personally and professionally, in our interactions in social media and with each other. So, a few bits of background information, a few things to think about, and now let's move on to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Dorene, Dr. Saletti. I appreciate that you're helping us think about the reality through some of the studies that have been done. And I think of how, what really is going to make a difference is how we have an ability to transform how we communicate online, but often that's linked to how we have a relationship with those online, right? So it seems like it's a lot easier if you don't know people to engage in this kind of incivility. And so in a sense, what we're going to shift toward in the conversation now is how we have, leaders who've had experience in building community kind of from the ground toward online, right? And what I mean is, people who live and work in the community that see people face to face, that then are able to engage with people in online spaces, and maybe then reach out and build that community further, online through having that ground, or that center of a community. And so I am going to now just do a brief introduction of the other local leaders that are going to join us. And then I'm going to ask them to talk a little bit more about themselves. And we're going to do some question and answer kind of exchange for a bit. And then we will open it up for the audience to ask some questions too. So I am excited because we have 4 people that I've had an opportunity to work with, some longer than others. Most of them are alumni of Frostburg State University. All of them are doing amazing work. And so I think what's neat is we have a mix of people that have different perspectives and standpoints, but also part of it is that they're doing different kinds of work. They're using social media in different ways, and they're, just committed to trying to transform, and be more civil in those spaces. So we have Mandela Echefu, who's the owner of Wheels Up Adventures in Cumberland. And so you might see him wave at you there on screen. He's online with us today. Yep. And Sid Thomas, who's the chair of the communications committee of the NAACP's local branch. So he can wave, you can see where he is there. He's got the Pittsburgh Pirates hat on, I see. And we have Ashley Swinford, who's here with me, the Director of Marketing and Outreach for Allegany County Library System. And Ashley Workman, Director of Tourism in Allegany County. So I'm going to start with these questions where I might kind of, indicate someone who can start, and then we'll do a go round. In some cases, I might just open it wide up. So I'll just let you know, what the plan is, and we'll do some of these and just see how it goes. And if you have questions as you listen, please go ahead and put them in the chat. We have our moderators online. They're going to be kind of watching for that. And as it might be appropriate, we might interrupt the flow of the Q&A. We might just wait, save some of those for later. So we'll just kind of work together to work through that. But first, I'd like each of you to just do a really brief, but more expanded introduction than I did, to tell us a little bit about how what you do intersects with social media, what social media you use regularly, and how that connects to the work you do in the community. So maybe we'll start with Ashley.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Ashley Workman, Director of Tourism for Allegany County, the mountainside of Maryland. And we are the official destination marketing organization for our region. We are a DMO. I'll say it a bit tonight. We love acronyms in marketing. So we are the official DMO. Our entire mission and purpose is to promote destination awareness for our region and to inspire visitors to come into our region, spend the night, and spend more money in our community. We're an economic development driver. And we use social media as a very heavy marketing platform for us. We're very active on Facebook and Instagram, Twitter. Those are really powerful tools for us, especially in terms of destination awareness and being able to communicate with our own community as well as visitors into the region. So thank you.
Yeah. And then does any of that connect to your personal life, I guess, in terms of how does social media and the work you do connect back to the relationships you have in the community?
Yeah, sure. So being my role, I have the opportunity to be out and about with the community quite a bit. For me personally, I love social media, and there are pros and cons to it. And I have to be very cognizant in my role as a leader in my digital footprint, as was kind of brought up earlier, and the role I play in the community. And so many years ago, I spent a lot of time in my past job speaking about social media to individuals in conferences and meetings. And one of the things I always shared with them, and I continue to say to this day, and by the way, I was part of the generation where I was 2006, I could get on Facebook because I was a college student, and I watched it transform to now being this massive powerful tool for marketing. But I used to always say to students then, if you would never want your photo and what you're saying on a billboard in Times Square for 30 seconds, don't do it, because it's the same thing as anything on social media. It's so quick for things to become viral in a positive or negative way.
Right. It just takes a snap, right?
Yeah.
Just one moment, and then it can be captured even if you try to delete it or remove it. So, okay, thank you, Ashley. And how about Ashley Swinford?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here tonight. And thank you for being here virtually and in person. I'm Ashley Swinford, the Director of Marketing and Outreach at the Allegany County Library System. So I manage our website, our social media, anything online, email communications that we get in. I'm an alumni from FSU here, and I was the social media analyst. I can't remember my official title, but for the Frostburg State social media, my last semester, which would have been fall 2013. So I've been working with it quite a while. So in my personal life, I don't use it as often as I do in my work life. So more of a, watching from the passenger seat in some cases, but I think that as a library employee and institutionally as a library, we are warriors, sometimes on the front line of, battling misinformation. So I'm very in tune to what we're speaking to tonight, and ready to get into it.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
Okay, how about Mandela? If you don't mind going next online.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I'll say the mood lighting is because I'm calling in from Nigeria, Africa, and the power just went out, so I'm improvising.
Oh,
Anyways, yeah. So my name is Mandela. Together with my wife Jamie, we own Wheels Up Adventures, and what we are about really. We're both graduates and alumni from FSU, the master's program, and all that stuff. But what we do with social media, is really a big tool that we use to promote our vision. Our mission as an organization really is to facilitate self-discovery outdoors. We do this primarily through access, knowledge, and community. Now, because of the things that we do, our customer base is really quite spread out. And for us to be able to effectively communicate with all those people, social media is a key tool that we use. So we're fairly active in Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, which is another platform that is under the radar now, but it's really going to really blow up in the next few years. And being a new company, my personal persona is really quite intertwined with Wheels Up, and so I'm quite active on both sides, both my personal and my social and my business social media. The gist is, I'm a millennial, so it's kind of in my DNA anymore to be on social media. So we embrace it and we use it.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And if you have any problems, just let us know. But I hope you can join us for the whole session. We really appreciate that you're fitting this into your schedule while you're visiting your family.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. And how about Sid, if you don't mind going next?
No, I'm the communications chair for the local NAACP. And of course, that stands for the National Association of Advancement of Colored People. And as an organization, we try to combat any kind of discrimination, not just towards people of color, although we do focus on that, but also towards any minorities, whether that be sexual orientation or ethnic or even religious. I use social media. I use Twitter, Instagram to promote all our local events, whether that's maybe a fundraiser or a march, or even a social activity like a party. Or I know recently we did a fundraiser for at Sheriff's Winery in Cumberland. And I also use social media frequently in my personal life. I write for the Allegany magazine. I'm a contributing writer for the Allegany magazine and also for the Washington City paper in DC. And I need to use social media weekly, if not daily, to promote an article or to promote something else that I'm working on.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it and the work you're doing. I mean, I think that's what's neat. I love, you know, the networking aspect of this. So remember, you can reach out to any of these participants, you know, any of these folks that are part of the conversation later. We can get you their contact information.
Thank you.
So, so yeah, we're going to do a quick round this time. We'll kind of maybe just go in the same order, so that kind of helps it flow. You can remember that order. We are going to add Dr. Saletti into this too. So if you don't mind going at the very end, because you kind of already spoke on this, you might just add a last thought after others answer. And so just maybe in a sentence, what's your definition of social media civility?
Starting with me. So I have to lean on to one of my favorite people that I follow, which is Brene Brown. I really just love her leadership. And she says that civility is claiming and caring for one's identity so deeply that your needs and beliefs are so important that you would not degrade someone else in the process. And so for me, it's, you know, the first step is politeness, but it's more about empathy. And so I really feel that, you know, social media civility it begins and ends with empathy.
Thanks, Ashley. Ashley?
I would say, well, the word civility can be, you know, examined in itself, but in broader terms of civility and adding social media to it, I would say my definition of social media civility is remember that on the other end is a person. There's someone, even though you're looking at a computer screen and you can't see them, there's a person, you know, and I think we have to remember that, you know, we're all human.
Thank you. Mandela?
Well, man, that's a hard question. You know, this should be easy. I generally go by the golden rule. You know, treat other people the way you want to be treated. However, I know sometimes people don't want to be treated the way I want to be treated. You know, sometimes I want you to just tell me how it is. You know, and sometimes I don't. So I think at the end of the day, I do like that word empathy. You know, I think it's just love. I think those are the two words that should be there. Love and empathy would be a good definition for me.
All right, thank you. And Sid?
I would say much the same, and I also like to say that just have a dialogue that's not divisive. I believe we can disagree and not be disagreeable. It's a quote. And one of the issues with social media is I've noticed that the negative interactions will get you more followers. They'll get you more attention than a positive posting or a positive quote or comment. And that's one of the problems on social media is negativity is encouraged or rewarded. But sometimes I think we can step back and make an effort to be positive.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, sometimes those algorithms feed that, as a way to keep, attracting attention to certain things. And for whatever reason, conflict is something people are drawn to, and drama, right? Of course. So, Dr. Saletti, do you have anything you want to add about a definition of social media civility?
Yeah, one of the things we can think about is, what social norms are in place for face-to-face interactions, and would we engage in that same way if we were working with someone in person? If we think about the kinds of things that sometimes people are willing to say to each other on social media, they aren't necessarily things someone would say in person to another. And that's been one of the challenges with social media civility, is we become kind of nameless and faceless. Although we do have names and faces, right? We don't necessarily have to use our real names, our real images, our likenesses on social media. And so it's easier sometimes to feel that you don't owe that same level of civility as you would in a face-to-face discussion. So the idea of empathy, and I love the mention, I think Mandela mentioned the platinum rule, which is do unto others as they wish to be done unto. So we take into consideration how someone would like to be treated. And we connect that with empathy and recognition of our humanness.
Yes, thank you. I mean, it makes me think about how in experiences with teaching, there is this disconnect that people are feeling, that's that burnout, of being on Zoom or, other platforms constantly. And that is what represents that gap that's missing, when you're on social media. And so if you can recognize that, that feeling, I guess it's that in some way we, have to remember that being in person makes a difference, and that you can't allow that distance to change the way that you relate. So let's move on to a question now that can be open to anyone. Maybe not everyone will respond to, but this is about the topic of influencing, because that is, something we're thinking about tonight. How do we influence using social media? How does it work in terms of the, popular way that we think about influencers, but maybe also how are you doing some practical things to build community that isn't just online, that isn't just about you showing up and kind of, stamping your, self online, but really about, you trying to connect with people. So the question is, what do you think it means to be an influencer on social media, and who are some of the influencers you follow and why? This is open to anyone. Any of our guests, I'll say to start.
I could start. I think as an influencer, at least the ones that I follow, there are kind of three things that I look for that I think most people subconsciously look for. You're looking to be engaged, you're looking to be educated, and you're looking to be entertained. Those seem to be the three things that typically work for us, especially when we're in the realm of positive engagement. We try to be very aware of people's time. When we talked about, treating people the way that we would treat them in person, the question that comes to mind is, are there new rules now in this new environment? Because a conversation I would have had with you in 5 minutes, in social media, I literally have 5 seconds before you move on. So are the rules different? Is civility, is the definition of civility different? I don't know. I think it kind of is, but I think to go back to your question, I think when it comes down to my limited time, my limited span of education, of attention, if you're not hitting one of those three, you're probably going to get scrolled by. So that's my answer to that.
Who do you follow?
I follow, I love Brene Brown, like she said. I follow Patagonia. I follow a lot of outdoor stuff, you know, so a lot of brands like that, marquee brands. I don't follow a ton of personalities. I follow Ken Coleman a little bit, but really I follow brands because they do that. They you know, educate, enlighten, and they're good examples for us to emulate.
That helps. Thank you. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was trying to get at is it might not even be a person, but be kind of a grouping or category, and that helped definitely. Thanks, Mandela. Anyone else want to respond to this?
Yeah, I want to say in terms of influencers, I know the NAACP president, Jerry Johnson, he's a frequent tweeter. And I like people that are very active on social media because a lot of times things change even over the course of a day. So for example, today he posted about our new Supreme Court justice and he commented on that. Locally, I like to promote local brands like Mandela's store, or for example, All That To Go is a local restaurant in Cumberland. So if I can tweet that, or I can post an Instagram post about that, and people can learn that this place exists, I feel as though I've done a pretty good job of influencing or helping a local business or organization.
Yeah, that I agree. And I do that too now that I think about it. I mean, I really feel like that partnering or that, you know, support that we can do within the broader region or the community, you know, that makes a real difference, and it builds relationships, but it also supports, you know, economic development. It supports, you know, the cultural diversity of our region too. So thanks, Sid.
I also find that I tend to support some of the local organizations that I want to be able to help to amplify their message. And there are some particular brands that align more closely with my values that I'll follow and support as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else?
I will just add that one thing that I look for in influencers or influencing brands is authenticity, that they talk the talk, walk the walk, and live by what they post. And just a few that come to the top of my head, I follow a lot of girl boss influencers, mm-hmm. and Nicole Lappin, a financial advisor for financial things, and Maria Menounos in terms of healthy living and self-care.
That's great to know. I mean, those are good ones to take note of and check them out. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else?
No, I just want to say what Sid said was really important, that I think when people think of influencer marketing, they think of people with massive following. But the reality is every single one of us is an influencer, mm-hmm. and we all have a network already. And we have the ability to, impact our own community or our friends and family in a very positive way or a negative way. And so it's just really important to realize that we are our own brands every single day. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that's something that Dr. Saletti has done some research on is, just how do we really build a sense of self and identity, and kind of think of it that way as, we're marketing ourselves. And, I think of how social media, like some of the things you've talked about, you really have to be intentional and thoughtful. You can't be just, casual and kind of just put things out there like you might in an informal conversation. I mean, you really, even though you might be using, say, Facebook in a more, interpersonal way with friends and family to share things, it still can be grabbed, it still can be, appear somewhere else. And so there's kind of an interesting dynamic, I think, that, helps make the need to remember influencing is very much about, our role as a human being that communicates, that's where it starts and where it ends, and that, your reputation can be affected, but it's also about building relationships, and so in some way, if you can, think about the strategies, this is our next question, that really will help you connect to people and influence people to, want to be a friend, a partner, someone that is listening to you online, reading your posts and following you, then that starts that relationship. And so I'm wondering, what are some of the strategies that you've used that are in some way getting people to, show up in your life in other ways, right? It could be at your business, it could be at your meeting, it could be at an event, it could be at the library, wherever it is. How do you see that what's happening online and the way that you're interacting online, helping you have people show up right there face to face with you? This is open to any of you to start.
One thing that I do is I try to be consistent. And I try to be a little bit diverse also. I try to, if one day I post something informative or something that has to do with education, maybe an hour later I'll post something that's maybe a little funny, some humor. And my idea is to keep people coming back to my page or keep coming back to the NAACP Twitter feed, just by a mixture of entertainment, like I said, humorous sometimes, and also being informative.
Mm-hmm. Someone else?
Yeah, I would say our strategy, I get this from one of the people who, on some level, if you don't know him, you probably put him in the uncivil part of things, is Gary Vee, even though he is a mastermind when it comes to social media. So there's pretty much two strategies. The first one is pretty much the most important one. Just care, just really care about the people and the things that you're doing. And I think that makes a difference. And the number two is you kind of have to educate yourself, and figure out the algorithm, because marketers, what they call it, top of mind or something, TOMO, something like that. If people are not seeing your stuff, as much as they love you, as much as they care about you, they're just not thinking about you. So I have made it a goal to post every single day. It kills me. It's a lot of work. It's a full-time job, but you work the algorithm, but in between all of that, you really have to care. I think that's how we do it.
What a great response. Thank you, Mandela. Anyone else?
Can I add one thing briefly? One other thing that I do is I try to post between like 8 and 10 o'clock in the morning, because everybody, what they do now is when they wake up, the first thing you do is grab your phone. And I've noticed I get a lot more feedback, a lot more eyes on what I'm doing if I post early. Later in the day, when people are at school and class or at work, or after work, they're running around with their kids, they don't have as much attention. But in the morning, I always get better feedback.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, and Ashley?
Yeah, I'll just add, I think Sid and Mandela spoke to it. Posting variety of things, figuring out the algorithm, getting in the right rhythm with your followers. And one thing I would add would be that we try to do from the library's perspective is transparency. Be as transparent and honest as we can. And for example, during the pandemic, we were getting ready to open, I believe, November 2020, and then things started to spike locally. And so it was within, I think, 3 days that we had to switch back. The announcements went out and everything, we had to switch back around. So, it was a lot of communicating and explaining, but, the message got across, and people, it was a good response with our, being honest about, the decision was just too late. But I would also say that at the library, each branch has its own page, and all the library staff have access to post. So people that are posting are the people that are seeing the people coming into the libraries and the people that they're trying to reach. So really being authentic to the personality of your branch or your brand as well.
I love these tips, the feedback, being informative, be engaging, be authentic, be consistent, be transparent. That's all so important as we think about engaging in social media, especially when we do want to influence or impact some behavior or some perspective. And, you know, Gary Vee was mentioned, and I'm not familiar personally, and I don't follow Gary Vee, but I'll definitely have to check it out, check the account out. But, you know, it's not necessarily incivility when you're a bit provocative, when you're direct and you're sharing a particular perspective. That doesn't necessarily mean you're being uncivil. So that's something for us to think about, is we can be direct, we can be straightforward, we can be provocative, we can share information that maybe not everybody likes, but we can still do it in a civil manner.
Yeah, and that actually is part of this question in a sense, is, you know, what is it that your social media is communicating that gets people to show up? And some of that is activist work. Some of that is, you know, making choices to do one thing versus another, or, you know, to live one place or another. And so, you know, you're sometimes beating out the competition, right, in that case. And so there, you know, are different ways that I guess we could think about that agitation or activism, or, you know, just being competitive in the marketplace is, you know, a way that, you know, you kind of have to make choices, and you're not just always being nice or caring, you know, as an intention, you know, as the main purpose anyway. It's more about kind of the principle of the way you're communicating, I guess, in that case. So anyone want to share anything else on this question? Okay, so let's kind of switch gears a little bit and think a little bit about the way that you maybe have had some challenging situations that, or, you know, some ways that you had to try to reach more people than maybe you might initially, you know. And some of this has to do, I think, also with, you know, thinking beyond the analytics part, or, you know, the timing or those kinds of things, but really your message, you know, and how your messaging affects who you reach and how you can reach them. And so this question is, what are the constraints of sharing cultural standpoints online to contribute to creating a diverse and inclusive community? Okay, and then what are some examples of how you've worked to include others that you don't think you've been including, you know, in earlier ways that you've been posting or interacting? You know, and this could really, you know, go across the spectrum. It could be those that you disagree with. It could be those that have accessibility issues. You know, it could be those that just are, you know, from oppressed communities or minorities. So, you know, it's really, how have you worked to be more inclusive, and what are some of the challenges you've overcome in doing that? So who would like to start response to that?
I'll jump in on this one. And it's kind of part of the reason I didn't answer before is because of what I'm going to share. So our brand and our role as an organization is rooted in inspiration. You know, we're trying to inspire people to want to travel to our destination. And so as marketers in the travel and hospitality industry, we have to understand that our travelers are looking for brands who represent them and their values. And so we are very cognizant that our work is a marathon and not a sprint, and we will never be finished. We have to always be mindful in everything we do, in our marketing campaigns, to our photo shoots, to our video shoots, everything we do, that are we being representative to the traveler community, and what does that look like? And so, you know, we work very hard, and we still have room to grow on making sure that our campaigns and the looks and the feels, we just got done our destination guide, which is coming out next week, that when people flip through that, are we representing, you know, multiple groups of people so that they do feel inspired and welcomed in our community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, we are in Western Maryland,
Yep.
right, which
Yep.
is a pretty homogeneously Caucasian region.
Absolutely.
You know, in lots of other ways, you know, there's some homogeneity, and yet there is diversity. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate that that's happening. But you're also saying it's not just who's here, it's who
We're bringing
want to
in.
invite.
Yeah, because our role is you know, a visitor to us is someone traveling 50 miles or more into our community. And our target markets are DC and Washington DC and Pittsburgh and Philly, very diverse communities. And so, you know, we have to be very cognizant of what we're doing and work very hard for that. And one of the other ways too is, and like Sid was bringing this up, is lifting up the leaders in our community that represent diversity, and trying to partner with them and give them a stronger voice in the marketplace is really important to us.
Great examples. And, I feel like we're all, those who live in this area trying to think about that cultural transformation that's possible through social media by working hard to just keep lifting those voices, and kind of integrating them into the work we do. And some of that is through social media. So someone else want to respond to this? And again,
I would like to say something about that before. I think one of the constraints that I've seen with social media actually is the format itself. People's attention span is not very long. So for me to give you whatever story I want to give you, whatever information I want to give you, especially when you start talking about diversity or inclusion or anything like that, those formats typically seem to be longer than the typical attention span. So I think that always is a struggle, especially for someone who talks as much as I do. I have so much I want to say, so little time. So a few of the strategies that we've had really is just to use some of the tools. Again, this kind of stretches people. Use some of the tools that these social media platforms have provided. So use more stories, use more reels, use more videos. I think videos is probably one of the more underrated tools that you have to tell your story in social media. Then when you think about bringing some of the underrepresented, underreached people, another strategy is just using different platforms. We think about it, depending on the age. If you're trying to reach anybody younger than 20 years right now, honestly, Facebook is not the place for you. If they're younger than 15, you better be on TikTok, So I think that's the key. Is just depending on how important it is for you to reach those groups, then you have to use the right platform to get across to them.
Yeah, that's why we wanted to do the hybrid event, because I think, we want to try some new intersections. And that's, we haven't talked a lot about how, video can be integrated into social media. I mean, in some senses, we can assume that, I guess, because they all, or most of them have that potential, or live stream, But I'm thinking also of, YouTube or podcasts that might be on different platforms, and how that does allow the story to come out more. And so, yeah, I agree. That's something really important. Anyone else?
Well, and there's certainly, you mentioned video. YouTube is one of the most widely used platforms. And initially, it may not have been seen as social media per se, but certainly in the ability to like and to follow and to share information, it really is a valuable social media tool. And so that's something that, we also have to think about reaching people where they are. Sometimes we can bring them to us, but sometimes we really have to go to them. And so to understand the user groups on the different platforms can certainly help to make social media campaigns more successful.
Anyone else?
I can add the library's perspective and our challenges. I feel like the library is uniquely challenged because institutionally libraries are supposed to be neutral entities. We provide resources on all opinions, all viewpoints, but on social media, we try to balance that. If we get posts or comments that can be considered misinformation, or of course, if they go against the rules of conduct there. If you wouldn't do it in the building, you can't do it online. But in terms of misinformation or possibly considered negative comments or views, again, we are the institution for information, so we just try to provide resources on all viewpoints and avenues for learning, and I think that's part of the root of civility and Choose Civility is being open to listening, like Dr. Lombardi said, and being open to new stories, new resources, new perspectives, the root of that civility there. And we just try to incorporate that into our social media responses as well.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up that point of literacy, you know, I mean, that you know, often I think gets associated with how well people can read or write or, you know, some of the fundamentals, but really it's about, you know, how are we making sense, whether it's through reading, writing, communicating, you know, getting a shared understanding of what does it mean to listen well, you know, when we come from so many different backgrounds or have different kinds of abilities or, you know, whatever it would be. So yeah, that I think, you know, as much as we need to continue to work on it in person, you know, inside organizations and communities and households, we need to do it online, right, too. So these are great ways that people are doing it through these organizations and efforts. Anything else on that? Okay, we just have a couple more questions and then we're going to open it up for your questions for those of you that are participating. And this next one kind of comes up as something that is relevant to what you just said, Ashley, like what happens when someone breaks the rules, right? I mean, and Choose Civility is about having a you know, sense of how we choose it based on some ways we can like identify, right? So we have principles that we share and we often use in discussions that, you know, I don't know if you want to put this up for a moment, Renee, that are, you know, the way that the chapter frames them. But basically, you know, we can come up with guidelines or context, right? Like your family does this all the time, your friendship circles do this, you know, people in organizations have certain protocol that they have to follow. You know, and so as you can see there, you know, you could use the civility principles that are, you know, provided through the context. They actually came from Dr. Forney's book about his 25 principles of civility when he was working at Johns Hopkins Civility Institute to try to understand how we can, you know, make sense together of our lived reality, but that's an illiteracy, you know, in a sense. So that's why I think it's really great that this is an initiative linked to the library system, and you know that the library being a hub for the community, you know, to provide resources and space, you know, for the community is where, you know, we're learning more about this. So, so the question I'm going to get to is, you know, what happens when people break the rules? What happens when you do see in the spaces you have, you know, control over or that you manage online, people acting in threatening ways, divisive ways, you know, it could be a variety of behaviors, lewd, you know, some of the things that Dr. Saletti pointed out that, you know, are the ways people understand incivility to be happening. In some cases, you know, these are things that are provoking violence or concern of violence. In some cases, they are microaggressions where people are feeling alienated and left out. And so I'm just wondering, you know, if you can share any examples of how you know, even if it's not the exact example, but something that you can remember you learned something from, and what did you do? How did you handle that?
I'll jump in. So I think it's really important to come back to the whole, you know, human approach. And it's so easy for things to escalate, you know, digitally, because you're not able to see a human space. You're not able to see the emotion of the reaction. It's easy to kind of like set it and forget it type thing, where if you were having a dialogue with another human being, the same things were said, I'm sure the direction of the conversation would go much differently. And so for us, you know, it's really about, and for me personally, it's about, if you're representing a brand, it's all about brand culture is so incredibly important, and being able to empower the people that are in charge with your digital footprint as a brand to make the decisions that are smart and know the difference between constructive criticism and feedback and pure, you know, hate speech or violence, and knowing the steps to take to resolve that. And there's obviously there's best practices for a lot of these things, but you know, you have a decision to make when you're in these roles, and it's, you know, there's multiple ones, but there's also the whole thing of coming back to your culture and not being able to allow your brand to allow hate or violence of any one person or any group of people to happen, and really, having a threshold for we won't stand for this, and how you handle it is really a case by case basis.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
do you have like a set of responses in some sense to draw on to respond? Do you use banning, blocking kinds of techniques, or, what are some of those actual strategies that might be
Yeah,
used?
sure. So in our case, I think sometimes divisive conversations come with the brand itself. News organizations tend to get that, very, loud platforms which sway one direction tend to get very divisive conversations. For us, we really have a positive space, and I feel like that's because that's our brand. It's a positive, inspiring space, and so we don't deal with that about very often. For us, it's more of really handling constructive criticism and having a very healthy dialogue. And what I love more than anything is when it is something like a very powerful conversation, and and we don't remove constructive criticism or feedback, but I love watching other people jump in and having a dialogue on your page, and you can kind of sit back and let it happen, and it's a really beautiful conversation, the learning experience. But anything that's very, obviously hateful or crude, it's removed, it's hidden, it's deleted, it's taken down. And if it's attacking another individual or group of people, we just can't stand by that.
Right. Yeah, and so a lot of times, I know people have had a lot of, confusion, I guess, cross-generationally and, all around our nation, like about First Amendment rights. And the reality is organizations can control their spaces. They can say what the protocol is, or they can offer guidelines, that frame the way that it can do it. So you can make those decisions. And you'd also point back to how it's about those relationships, so the people that already have a relationship with the brand and the community are going to kind of step in and be part of that conversation, it sounds like. Yeah. Someone else?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
responding with compassion. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Go ahead.
I was saying earlier, actually, Dr. Saletti, you actually said earlier that we can be provocative and still be civil. So I try to discern whether the person is passionate about the topic, or they're really trying to be mean-spirited. Sometimes people just don't know. Sometimes people are typing in all caps, and they don't even know that can be viewed as overly aggressive. So I try to make a determination whether this person is really trying to cause trouble, or this person is really a little bit emotional about the topic.
Yeah, those are definitely good practices. It's true. You can't assume, especially I've been really interested in cross-generational differences. Even with the, social media apps, we all kind of identify with different, apps because of our generational relationship to them. So we do have to think about, that's another way of having a diversity that we have to address, and that we have to be patient, with to learn more about, and to do that communication in a sense, that might be behind the scenes, or, that you extend out, you just don't jump to a conclusion around, like you're saying.
Right, and we have to remember that, with social media, we're missing some of the social cues that we might have if we were having a conversation more directly. And so that can lead to misinterpretation of messaging and intent. So responding with compassion is often a good first step, because it is difficult sometimes to determine where somebody is coming from, what the root of that message might be. There is, that level of impersonality related to use of social media.
Anyone else?
I'll just leave that. I think one of the tools that I have, a lot of us have, which is sometimes it's okay to just not respond. I think sometimes, sometimes you just let it sit there, and I do that a lot. And, if I had $1 for every comment I've written, and before I hit send, I say, what do you think is going to happen as a result of this comment? And I just delete it and I just move on. So you don't always have to respond. That's a tool.
That's probably the greatest insight of all, isn't it, right, when you think about it? Because we, in our own interpersonal interactions face to face, that can be challenging, but that's also a rule that's helpful. Sometimes you just need to walk away and regroup, and so it's a very similar thing, but also let it speak for itself, that comment, I mean, sometimes that's all that's necessary, so yeah. So I'm kind of connected to that, and, as we lead up to the, second to last question here anyway, is, how you manage misinformation on one hand or overload. So I'm going to kind of let you choose what you respond to here. We're living in a time when we are overloaded by information, and a lot of it's actually misinformation, right? Or it's not, something that's really true, that represents something helpful, that's going to contribute to society in a constructive way. And so how do you manage that? How do you manage, grappling with that kind of context?
I can start us off one example that comes to my mind is there was a post recently on a community community watch page, what's going on at the LaVale Library. And so there was a big discussion, it's going to be an Olive Garden, it's going to be another Dollar General, all these things that are going into it that, at that point, was it appropriate as an organization, and would Facebook allow me, because I believe they've changed that recently, to jump in there as an organization, to jump, add to the comments. So we just took it a step back and thought, we're gonna grab some of the rumors, because also, it's budget time, and there were some proposed changes to library hours in some of the smaller branches as we approach the new fiscal year, from budget cuts that come in from the state. But rumors went around, we were closing a branch, all these different misinformation things were happening about the library all at once, really. So it was a lot, and to combat misinformation and information overload at the same time, posting from the page, the information, being transparent about it, and also we think about those that don't have access, because a lot of our patrons come to the library for their access to the internet, and so thinking about ways to distribute that information in print as well, but just taking a step back, maybe not getting into the weeds of if misinformation is coming from comments, maybe taking it back and doing a post from your page rather than responding to every single person.
That's a great example. Yeah.
And it can be challenging because social media platforms, the way they're designed, they actually reward engagement, not accuracy. So it really isn't about how accurate information is. It's about, how many likes, how many shares you get. That's kind of the reward, right, with social media. And so it can be challenging then, because misinformation tends to spread pretty rapidly.
Any other thoughts?
I think in my personal experience, I don't deal with a lot of misinformation, but I've seen a lot of opportunities where misinformation was handled poorly. A good example is the whole Rocky Gap show that happened. I feel like it's very few times, and maybe the people who do this better know, but I find that there are very few times where giving people an opportunity to ask you questions and you can answer in an open forum bites you in the butt. There are very few times. I think, the people who are looking to instigate will always find material to do that. But the people who have a true desire to hear the truth and have their questions answered. So I think, like when I watch some of these shows, I forget all these fixers, they are so quick to get a statement out, have a news conference, say something, So I think misinformation, especially on social media, there are tools that you have there. You could do a Facebook Live. You can do whatever you need to do to have these questions answered. So I think that's a strategy that we should probably think about using more often, because if you just let them go, they'll they'll make some more stories up. So answer their questions.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just so people know, I mean, without a long explanation or discussion, the Rocky Gap incident or, situation, can you just briefly explain in case people don't know?
So my understanding, again, I still don't know what the full story is, but there was some, I believe, misinformation as to the desire of our legislators to pretty much privatize Rocky Gap. I do not believe that was their intent, but that kind of really just took off. And, there was a big movement to save that. And it took so long for them to be able to come out there and answer the questions. And it just wasn't handled the greatest, I believe.
Yeah. Well, and it is an example, again, sometimes we learn it through, kind of the back and forth on social media or, face-to-face conversations that some of it's rumor, some of it's true, maybe, or based on somebody having read the truth or, the report or news story. And so, yeah, a lot of it's piecing together the information sometimes, through, different channels and then deciding, go to the source, if you still don't know. So that's kind of, what you're saying is be the source and put it out there. So I really appreciate that. So we are going to move into this last question and then we'll open it up to see if anyone wants to ask anything of our guests here that are with us. So this last thing is just your chance to share an online campaign or strategy that you're really proud of, that you really are excited about having been part of, or, shaping, and how did it inspire and spark community involvement and connection? Does anyone want to start?
I'll jump in. So for the tourism office, we've had to wear many hats and we've had to pivot in our role in social media over the last 2 years with the pandemic. And we went from being like an inspirational, come visit us, to like when the shutdowns happened and stay-at-home orders became in place, it was very hard for the travel and tourism industry, which completely kind of came to a halt. And we had to pivot to become a resource center and a place to guide our own community and the visitors on what was safe and what was not safe. And of course, there was a lot of conversations happening on social media during that time, because it was just, I think our mental well-being was being challenged as there was just a lot of divisive conversations. And so one thing we did as a community is we created the Pledge to Prevent program during that time frame. And it was really trying to get all of our businesses in our community engaged in understanding best practices during the pandemic, and really empowering our businesses to, during that time, it was obviously the mask mandates were in place, and there was, how many people could be in a space. There was all these things I think we forget about now so quickly of how our life was. And we saw it as an opportunity for our office, instead of kind of watching everyone flounder on what to do, is to be the leaders in the space and say, we're going to take charge here, and we're going to create a community that's engaging in safety mechanisms and well-being mechanisms. And we created this Pledge to Prevent, and we had like 98 businesses signed up. They had a sticker on their door. They were pledging to follow best practices by the CDC guidelines. And it was, once the community started to re-engage and open, the orders lifted, it allowed for the visitors and communities to feel safe, knowing that our businesses were part of the conversation. And so that's something we're really proud of looking back on, even though it feels forever ago, yet just still there,
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think that, we just had the mandate on campus, and, the choice that you now have to mask on campus happened last week. So, we were one of the organizations that kind of held on to that the longest. But I understand, yeah, it's all changing very rapidly, and then it just has to keep moving back into the past as the new interesting stuff comes up. But yeah, so pledging to prevent the spread, right, of the virus, and how that's a value, health and well-being. It was at the center of that, and that you created an inclusive process. Like we could, as a community, the different businesses and organizations could be part of that. I love it. So, someone else, your example.
Yeah, I would say as an organization, the local NAACP, we've done several like marches recently. I know we did one for Breonna Taylor. And last year we did a Juneteenth festival that we did primarily on social media, word of mouth. And they both really had a good turnout. And of course, we're going to do it again this June.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's terrific. I mean, and it's true. That really is about that partnership between, you know, the messaging online and kind of, you know, helping people know where to show up, where to, you know, how to contribute, how to be part of, you know, supporting these messages around, you know, what's at stake, or, you know, who, you know, we want to in some way hold up and not forget, you know. And so, yeah, I've been really glad to be part of those in some cases, and, you know, I look forward to supporting this year's Juneteenth. Can you tell us a little bit about what people might expect to look for and when online, so they know more about that?
Yes, this year we're actually going to expand Juneteenth. We're having a parade. We're having the main festival down at Canal Place. We're having several bands. And this year we're having a gospel explosion on Sunday. So it's going to be 3 days of events. So it's going to be really good this year. And I'm going to keep everybody posted, and follow me and on social media, follow NAACP, Allegany Branch on Twitter and on Instagram.
Great, Sid. Thank you so much. We will do. Someone else?
I will add a current campaign that we have right now, and a plug for more Choose Civility events that we have. We're doing Chalk It Up to Civility, a fun community collaborative event that Renee is really taking the lead on, and getting a lot of community partners involved, getting the community involved, just writing with sidewalk chalk messages of positivity and inspiration. And we have several events going on. Thank you, Renee, posting the URL in the chat there now, so you can check out other events that are going on. But it is hashtag, thanks to Alicia, great idea, hashtag Chalk It Up to Civility.
Yeah, I don't know, for some reason that just came into my head, and I thought about what actually happened during the pandemic, because that was one of the things that I was able to do, is walk outside my house and write with chalk, because I'm a kid at heart still, you know. But I did some chalking on my own sidewalk, and I thought about, that's something you can do, you know, whatever is happening with our lives. In most cases, you know, you can go into some space or have a chalkboard, you know, in your house, and you can do this with kids. You can be, you know, doing this with your grandparents. At any age, we can do this, and we're hoping that, you know, it is something that people get into, and we just see where it goes. It's going to include some artists, right, and some muralists. Renee, is there anything else you want to add about the events associated with that?
Yes, actually, we'll have at least 3 events with Chalk It Up to Civility. Downtown Cumberland and Canal Place, they'll have the Easter Bunny, and we'll have live music with Will Harkin, and that is on April 16th, starting at 10:30 a.m. And on April 21st at the Westernport Elementary School, they have their community nights. They're starting out, that'll be their first night, and that is at 6:45 p.m. And then during the Frostburg Arts Walk on Saturday, April 30th, which is from 11 to 5, they're going to have a chalk mural contest, which they've had before, and we thought, hey, that's an excellent way to combine with Chalk It Up to Civility.
Great, thank you. If you want to know more, check out the Allegany County Library System page, or search, you know, Choose Allegany County. Choose Allegany, as I always said. I'm not going to work for your community. No, I think that's what's neat is, you know, there's a great intersection of partnerships that are all here in the room. So I just wanted to check and see, Mandela, did you want to share any examples before we shift to opening for questions?
Oh, real quick, I'm just going to say I'm proud about our Wheels Up Wednesdays. It's just a little thing we do. We get together in front of the shop, and we go out there and just get outside. No pressure. Great opportunity to connect and build community. So
So you
it's
post
on our social media. Yeah,
something,
we
yeah.
post.
Yeah.
Correct.
So yeah, check out Will's Up. I think what's neat is that, you know, it's kind of getting us healthy. You know, we got to get outside, and not just because that's the only place we can go to connect now, thank goodness, but you know, it's a way for us to really, you know, be better human beings and connect with our environment. So thanks, but you're all doing amazing things. Thank you to Dr. Saletti. What I want to do is just for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, open it up to see if anyone from our audience has any questions that they want to put out there. You can come on and speak, you know, put your hand up to get called on to do that. You can put it in the chat and we can call on you or read it out for you that way. So I invite you to see if you have any questions for our guests.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Earlier in the conversation, Dr. Saletti, you said something about how the social media is not dangerous maybe, but sometimes dangerous because it's faceless. What do you feel about the metaverse, where people can take on different personalities and different?
I don't know that I know enough about it to really answer that question. I think the challenges that we see in social media with the impersonal nature of it, with the challenges related to seeing tone and intent, could potentially be magnified. You know, will it be something like Second Life where people are just kind of having fun with it? Or will it be something that has a different kind of impact? So I think it's going to be interesting as this emerges.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the next frontier, I guess, here, right, is to think about this and how fast or in what ways that starts to transform, you know, our social reality. Any other questions?
Justin, go ahead.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Justin.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to say thank you guys for a great discussion, and to kind of piggyback off of that question, it kind of played into what I was thinking about asking was, with the advances in technology and social media, like the not specifically the metaverse, just the advances in with TikTok and the amount of screen time that everyone is using nowadays and stuff like that. Do you guys, and this is open to anyone, or it could just kind of be an open discussion, do you feel that the advances have more positive or negative effects for our society as a whole? That type of online screen time, there's good things about communication and bad things. There's pros and cons. So I was just wondering if anyone had any thoughts on whether it's overall more positive or negative the way our technology is trending.
Anyone?
Well, you know, screen time has increased, especially since the pandemic. And so I don't know if that is necessarily going to lead to more incivility online or less as people become more comfortable with that as a key means of engagement. You know, it's different when we're in an environment like Zoom right now, where we can, at least for those who have their cameras on, you know, we can see each other. And so we can have a conversation differently than we would if we were in social media. And even in Zoom, because typically you are signing in with your name or there's some connection to you, the chat tends to be a little more civil. So increases in screen time and increases in technological advances, if it continues to allow us to depersonalize, then we'll continue to face many of the same issues related to civility. If it gives us the opportunity to connect in a more personal manner, that may help to alleviate some of the challenges related to civility that we've been talking about. That's a great question.
Hey, Justin, my 2 cents on that. Again, I'm not an expert by any standard, but I really do think that as we spend more and more time in cyber world online, I really do think the laws of civility and civil language, I think they will begin to shift. I think they already actually have begun to shift. Coming and visiting my home in Nigeria, the way that people treat their elders, the way, like my daughter just told me today, she said, how come people don't say hi? People say good afternoon. There's still this language and this stature. So I think that people's definitions of respect and civility, again, this is just a guess, I think it will be lowered. I think things that really trigger us today will just roll off our backs and we'll just label someone a troll and move on. I don't know if that's good, probably not, but I think the standards we have for each other as human beings will be directly proportional to the amount of time we spend with one another. And social media has made our interactions very succinct and limited and abbreviated. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't think it's good or bad. I just think it'll be different.
Yeah, and I'm not a medical expert, but I'm thinking of the, physical implications of screen time and just, sitting and, all the things that we, I guess, learned through television, gaining popularity in the 20th century, and how that can have an effect on us as human beings and our health and well-being. I think that's part of this discussion too for another day. But I'm going to see, are there any other questions that we have in the room?
Annie, would you like to read your question? I'll go ahead and read, hold on, what we have here. Okay, I'll read Annie's question. Do you ever delete comments or posts that attract negative comments after they've been up for a while? I have been in a position where I posted something that I got responses I wasn't expecting, and I felt torn about leaving it up on my page, even though they weren't my comments, or erasing it, and feeling like I am censoring the conversation. Thoughts?
I know for me, I think the main key is to control your platform. I don't have a problem with censoring, aggressive or abusive comments. So I don't allow anybody involved in my page or Twitter feed or whatever it is to abuse anybody else. So if it's a comment, I delete it. Simple as that.
Other thoughts?
I think to Sydney's point, we do, and Dr. Raminsky, you made this point earlier, that organizations do have control over those platforms and can make those decisions. And so we do have that ability to make choices related to what we allow on our own pages and the platforms that we are using. And sometimes it makes sense to eliminate comments that are particularly difficult or could be harmful. And sometimes it makes sense when you have, again, those provocative comments, a comment that really asks you to support your own or defend your own position. Sometimes they can lead to interesting conversations. So I think it really varies, and each individual gets to make those choices.
Yeah, I think that organizations or contexts that feel like they're not letting people place things, that's when it can backfire, where maybe people don't understand the parameters of what's allowed, and that's why I think it helps to be clear or to try to have some kind of guidance, ground rules or, principles out there. And even those, sometimes people complain there's rules, right? But, if you can come up with the rules in an inclusive way, right, or an invitational way, that can help too. And so, if somebody just jumps into a context, and hasn't been a member or doesn't have a relationship with the group, right, or the community, then maybe they don't know that yet, or that guidance, or that common understanding of culture. But, I do think that's why we're having this conversation, is to think about, if we can be better communicators in that way, to kind of say, this is the way we'd like to have the conversation, or this is the way we, want to help facilitate the discussion online, or, when we come together offline, then that'll make a difference.
I love Allison's point in the chat that we curate our own pages. We curate these conversations on our pages. So a great way to think about it.
Yeah. So did we have any final questions, or do you think we're ready to wrap up?
Yes, we do. Siobhan, would you like to go?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Siobhan, and I work with Dr. Raminsky as one of the lab assistants in our communication leadership lab. And I just wanted to ask a question in reference to bias, since we are in the middle of our Bobcats Against Bias campaign right now. It's kind of hard to be civil on social media or in any setting when you don't check your bias at the door, because those are one of the things that either people recognize or, they don't recognize. So in saying this, how can we try to create more civil space recognize their biases, if this sense? So people can.
We're losing you a little bit, I think.
Anyone else's viewpoint on it, so they can be civil.
You have such a good question there, but we're missing some of it. So can you repeat it, or if we have that same thing, maybe you put a little bit more of it in the chat, but try to repeat it and see, maybe it'll work this time.
Okay, sorry. I am having a bad connection. Basically just asking, how is it that we can help people, or help people recognize their biases when they're online and trying to be civil with others? Because if you don't understand that you have bias towards certain topics and situations, you can't be civil because you're not able to see other people's viewpoints. So what are ways that, if we're seeing incivility on posts or things like that, we can, maybe in a private chat or something like that, tell someone or suggest to someone, check your biases, or is this something, that you can think out of the box about, so that you can communicate civilly with others? Because I feel like a lot of miscommunications and incivility online is because people have those biases that they're not checking, within themselves before they're interacting with others.
Yeah, there is, and this is often used in person, but it could be used in a social media environment. But one of the frameworks that we can use to address bias is the 3 C's: clarify, call it out, and close. So the idea is that, first you want to clarify to make sure you're properly understanding what someone is expressing to you. And if it is something that is bias-based, call it out for what it is in a direct, straightforward manner, and then close by either sharing opportunities or moving the conversation on. So for example, if someone would post, let's see, something like, well, she's a woman with young children, she won't take that job because there's travel involved. Well, how do you know? Have you spoken with that person in particular? Are you aware that some women with children do travel? So the clarifying, about asking how do you know, and then calling it out. Well, that's a really big assumption to make. So you're assuming that all women won't travel if they have children, right? And then how can you close that? Well, you might think about opportunities. Well, there are a number of women who do travel for their work. Sometimes they have other childcare arrangements. Sometimes the children travel with them. But what is somebody really trying to say? And so sometimes clarify, call it out, and close can be helpful when you're dealing with bias.
That's really great. That's a really great concept to have. And I like that. Could you put that in the chat so I can write that down for future references? And also one thing that I did want to share was that I was on TikTok and I found a young lady who before she interacts with people, not just on social media, but in person, she uses the acronym of THINK. So is it thoughtful? Is it honest? Is it intelligent? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And so that is another way that I have just been trying to navigate interacting with people online and in person, because sometimes it can be hard to be civil on topics that we're passionate about. But just taking a step back and remembering think, for me at least, that has been really helpful.
That's awesome. I'll just end by saying that. And I think we are going to try to wrap it up now. What I would really appreciate is if you all just hashtag the experience you had, and we will put this up online later so you can take a look at it again or share it with others. We really appreciate you all being here. And again, a special thanks to our guests and to Dr. Saletti, our leader in residence. We do want to take a moment just to tell you that there's some other opportunities you might want to take advantage of. There is an upcoming event online after this, really a debate around whether or not higher education is something that is holding us back or helping people move forward. And this is a really important discussion to have as people are trying to grapple with decisions, about how to get ahead, how to get educated. And that's through Allegany College of Maryland. There's also opportunities that are going to continue, as we know about with Chalk It Up to Civility. But on campus, through the Communication Leadership Lab, we have the Civility Cup Award that's going to be seeking nominations or self-nomination. So if you know of a Frostburg State student or you yourself are one that want to take a look at that description, that's all available online on our website and on our social media. And thanks to Siobhan, she's doing a terrific job of helping us update those pages online on Twitter and Instagram, as well as Facebook. And I want to turn it over just for a moment to Patrick O'Brien, who's one of our partners here as a co-sponsor. Patrick and I have worked together looking at dialogue, deliberation, and debate as these different ways to, communicate and make sense of, our lives and how we solve problems. And in particular, the Times Talks have been a place that we've intersected a lot, to do work with students and community members. And Patrick was part of our podcast that we're going to be sharing online soon about political discourse and how we did to be more civil with it. So I'm just going to turn it over to you if there are any other events that are coming up through the Office of Civic Engagement at FSU.
Sure. So our next Times Talk is actually a week from today, 12:30 here in the Lane Center in room 111. So join us. We'll have some snacks and a conversation about an article in the New York Times. But two community events I wanted to make people aware of. April 16th, Saturday, April 16th through Tuesday, April 19th, we will be doing our annual book giveaway at City Place on South Water Street. We get a tractor trailer load of books and supplies, and it's free to the community. So please come out. We'll be open each day, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. So please come join us. It's hosted by our A-Star AmeriCorps program here on campus. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to get some great resources. And then the other opportunity I wanted people to know about is that we were working on putting together a candidates forum for the gubernatorial candidates that will be facing a primary. So that's going to be April 30th at 6 p.m. here in the Lane Center, ARMA. And that is also co-sponsored by Allegany College of Maryland and Garrett College. So we hope you come and join us. There'll be more information coming out about that on social media and all sorts of other places. So we hope you get to join us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that, linkage between communication, leadership, and engagement, is really necessary and strong, and we're really excited to, continue to do programs and offer opportunities like this. So any other announcements or any final closing comments? Okay, I think that's a wrap. So thank you so much for being part of this evening, and I look forward to keeping the conversation going in the next event.
Thank you.
Let's give ourselves a round of applause for a hybrid event.